Welcome to the Spool podcast. Unwind with Dr. Nils Roemer, Dean of the Bass School at UT Dallas.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us one more time. This is truly our last session of the year, and we very much wanted to have a little bit fun with this. So here's what we did, so you understand the madness that will follow. We took all of the transcripts from all 23 podcasts that we created over this last year and uploaded them to Google Notebook LM, and then prompted the AI to generate questions for us. At the same time, one of my exceptionally talented friends, Adrian, somehow miraculously created an AI version of me with a strange German accent. I don't know why he did that, who's asking me some of those questions. And so we're just going to roll with this for a moment. So the questions that you're hearing come from my digital twin of sorts, who has received the questions from the Google Notebook. So here we go. And don't mind the accent. I don't know where this one comes from, you know?
Hi, Dean Roemer. How are you today?
I'm pretty good. I'm kind of curious about how all of this is going to work out. Find it a little funny talking to myself in a small can, but I'm not sure about how you speak, but we'll go with this, okay?
First question. You mentioned being born in Hamburg, Germany. How do you think growing up in a port city influenced your personal and professional journey, leading you to live and work in many different places?
Well, you said it already. You're a smart one, you know, that growing up in a city that has a big port early on meant to think beyond, you know, your immediate vicinity, and created a great deal of curiosity for me really early on, and way before I literally moved already as a teenager, which is not uncommon in Europe. I traveled quite widely, first with my parents, but then also eventually from the age of 14, 15 by myself across Europe. My parents were big advocates for education, and so I spent some summers in England where I was meant to learn English, and then I spent some summers in France where I was meant to learn French. And so you started to develop this curiosity of and an identity for yourself that was not tied any longer solely to your home city, nor really to your country, but became very quickly European. And then from there it went. And so lots of ways. The other part that I carried forward is really a fascination with water. I love water in all shapes and forms, as seas, as lakes, as oceans. And so I think that also possibly comes from that early age.
You were the first in your family to go to college. Can you elaborate on the significance of this decision for you and your family, and how it shaped your aspirations?
You know, it's something that you're really not conscious of early on. You know, I had like my parents, my grandparents tell me early on that I would be the one. And, you know, since that involved a lot of attention and affection, I was always sure when I was like very young. You know, I think it all only really started to make more sense to me how significant it became much later on when I actually had accomplished it, and understood also when I was looking at my kids what a kind of big leap my parents actually took when they said, sure. And what do you want to study again? History? Sure. And so I think that's more when it started to take on a meaning for me when I was thinking about my own kids and their respective choices, that I thought, wow, that was a lot of, you know, willingness to kind of go on an adventure here from the side of my parents, all the way down to when I said, you know, I had been already all lined up for a PhD program in Hamburg, and when I turned all of that down and said, I have a much better idea, I'm going to go to New York and study there, then they said, well, they didn't right away said sure. They were like painfully saying sure, because they kind of understood that that possibly would not be a temporary thing, but would be a lasting departure. But yeah, so for me, the whole meaning of that, you know, being first generation really only acquired greater significance once I was an adult and was thinking more about my own kids. And now as a dean, also thinking about all the students that come to us who are in a similar situation, that I think like, good for you, but also I so much applaud your parents for you know, putting all that trust in you.
Your educational journey involved studying history, philosophy, and literature. How did you navigate these different intellectual interests? And what made you so determined to pursue the humanities?
A good question. Jokingly, I always say, all these fields are for the undecided, the ones who always want to like move and evolve. And there's a lot of truth to it, that each one of these fields has mattered to my intellectual kind of journey at some point or another a bit more. I've been more of an intellectual historian at some point, more of a cultural historian at some other point. So it's in lots of ways really a type of education that empowers you to think in a particular way. And I think that was for me early on really, really important. And may like kind of connect again a little bit with this first generation question, that for me, this is a way how I had, acquired a voice. I was young, I was German, I was 18, but hey, I knew something that not everyone knew, and I was able to cite authors and talk smart, and it just kind of gave you something. But I think ultimately it's something that has allowed me all the way. I mean, that's why we're doing this fun here now. The driving motivation for me has always been curiosity. That's the only thing, and I have boundless amounts of that apparently. And those fields can kind of sustain this in perfect ways. Also help me now to navigate our big technological changes again from that perspective. And I think the humanistic education is a very, very deep grounding of oneself, of one's role in society, but also a kind of openness toward a constant journey of exploration. So it's curiosity, I think, that has kept me kind of in the saddle, so to speak. You have some good questions. I'll let you ask a few more. Let's see how that goes.
You describe the Bass School as a place where students can get really messy and explore wide-ranging opportunities beyond rigid career paths. How do you foster an environment that encourages this kind of exploration, particularly for students who may not have their future mapped out?
Well, what's really important is that the fostering is not just done by me, but most importantly by my faculty. And so I'm there together with lots of friends. We have a big faculty dedicated to exactly accomplishing this, meaning creating an environment that allows students to thrive and to grow in whatever ways they want. What as of late I've realized is that, it's not just simply what happens in the classroom, what individual professors teach or don't, but it's really also what kind of spaces you create and what kind of environment you're shaping. And so we've been working really hard of creating a very open environment where students have additional learning opportunities outside of the classrooms and labs and studios, really embracing also the architecture of our various buildings, making sure that there's everywhere an opportunity for students to kind of sit together and hang out. We're drawing them into these spaces with a very, unique kind of strategy, outlets. Wherever they find outlets, they're usually gonna be. And so I think there are lots of these kind of considerations that one has to keep in mind when one wants to foster that kind of opportunity for students to pursue their own goals, because we are really living in a world that is rapidly changing, and not all of the students' education will directly map onto career choices, not in the ways in which my parents had a career that they commenced. My mom started working at the age of 14 and then kind of stayed with her skill sets, more or less expanded it. But it was all in all a very linear development. I think those times are largely over.
The Bass School combines traditional humanities, visual and performing arts, design, and animation and games. What is the philosophical underpinning of bringing these diverse disciplines together? And how does this interdisciplinary approach prepare students for the complexities of the 21st century?
Wow, when you put these things that way, it sounds really all awfully smart. So let me just unwrap that. So I think to me is how do we create an environment where stuff happens? And I think another way of thinking about these different disciplines is that they all derive their meaning in their own uniqueness, and students thrive in them, but also, for lack of a better word, when they collide with each other, because they provide different questions, different ways of thinking, and different ways of kind of communicating and engaging that. And I think in these collisions of differences, that's where the good stuff can also happen. That's where students then have to kind of reconcile themselves to what ways they want to think about it. It's an entirely a different, way to think about an issue, whether you enter it, let's say, from a literary perspective, than from a historical perspective. And it's, again, an entirely different issue as to whether you want to convert that into a theater performance, an animation, or a research paper. And so each one of those requires a certain act of translational intelligence of sorts. And I think that ability is exactly what will serve our students for their careers to come. Let's see, go easy on me. Don't ask all these tough questions here.
You've emphasized the importance of storytelling as a powerful tool for persuasion and understanding. How is storytelling integrated into the curriculum of the Bass School? And in what ways do you believe it is crucial for students to master this skill for their future careers and as engaged citizens?
So I think storytelling is really one of the most profound elements of our humanity in general, of the way by which we make sense. I mean, you asked me just a whole bunch of clever questions about myself, my upbringing and the likes. And the way we make sense of our own is we're telling ourselves stories that, are part of our memory, stories that our parents have told us about ourselves, stories that maybe friends have told us. So it's a big component of how we make sense of our own identity, for starters. It therefore becomes also really the way by which students make sense of whatever they study and engage with. And by storytelling, we're just meaning essentially not just, telling little stories of sorts, but any kind of narrative of sorts that takes something from here to there, any kind of thing that tries to press an issue into some kind of developmental scheme where it moves from somewhere to somewhere else. And I think that's how we as humans comprehend many things. Anything that is nonlinear can be really exciting, and we have lots of those things as well. We're actually exploring them probably now more than ever, the kind of immersive environments that are not linear, not structured. But we find them also incredibly perplexing and disorienting, which is really healthy and really helpful. But then when we come out of that, we want to put it again into this and then a before and then now and a then. So I think we're just, as humans, structured, I think, into thinking about these, narratives in that way often.
You noted that current students are looking for an education that equips them not just for the next job, but for the next 10 jobs. How does this demand for adaptability influence the educational philosophy and curriculum development at the Bass School?
Good question. How to prepare for the unforeseeable, for the unknown. So that's just almost an impossibility, it seems. I think what we're striving for is educating students in a variety of things, but also in a variety of ways. And I think it's this variety of ways by which they work by themselves, work with each other, work with faculty. That's, I think, the things that really prepares them for any kind of thing going forward. That they will have been, would have had to adapt themselves into different environments, into different work groups, into people who think differently than they do, but collectively also to produce something. So I think that'll be that ability that goes forward. What you want is students really in this environment. I mean, parents like myself, we want our students, our children, to be happy, successful, and all these things. But what we truly also, should ask of is that they will experience things that they haven't experienced before, that they will kind of come to think, oh my, I had no idea that I would enjoy this or that I'm actually good at this, and that it just brings them to different versions of themselves by the time they graduate.
You are a passionate baker. Beyond your professional roles, what other personal passions or hobbies do you engage in? And how do they inform your approach to leadership, teaching, or understanding the world?
This is an AI question, so not everything links together, I think. But, I think balance is really important. So yes, I do like baking. I like something about the drawn-out process. I find it utterly rewarding if after hours and hours, all of a sudden, the entire house is filled with that smell of a new bread. It's like a miniature miracle of production of sorts when it happens. I mentioned earlier my passion for water in all shapes and forms. I'm a passionate swimmer, like to spend endless amounts of time in ocean, snorkeling and the likes. bicycling, yoga, do a lot of exercising these days. Like to sleep a lot whenever I can. I enjoy the Texas weather, but mostly also, and this is part of the beauty of my job, the ability really to meet people, to learn about them, to travel, and thereby to constantly expand my own horizon. So this is the funnest part of being a dean, that you're challenged in all possible and impossible ways. And the only way to do and deal with that is, to be willing to learn. I have faculty, each one of them is an expert in their respective field, and they all want to talk to me. And so I jokingly always say, I need to have at least 3 smart sentences into every topic, just kind of to hold my own to the best of my abilities, or ideally to read up and to expand it. And I think that's truly what's been so rewarding about this job.
Any final thoughts before we close this season out?
I think it's been a wonderful opportunity, like I just said, to meet exceptionally smart and engaging individuals, and hopefully to bring in this form of a podcast, some of that out to you as you're watching. We're going to work on your accent. This Germanness in the background should have not been there, but we'll take you for today as my twin double. Bye you, bye me, bye everyone. Thank you.